Hello, everyone. This is my second podcast episode. Um, it's taken me quite a while to film this. I've been putting it off, honestly. Don't really know why. Just been lazy, I guess. A little bit of an upgrade from my look last time. I was just wearing my techno watch and my other wig and stuff last time, but we've changed it up a bit. I recently got this wig. And I went to go see Tommy and its Survival Toy with this wig on. It was fun. It was a good time. But yeah, we're gonna get right into it. So we're still reading I'm Somewhere, You're Somewhere. This is the second chapter, just like it's the second episode. Um, I'm gonna try my best to go slower and be understood in this chapter, but we'll see how it goes. I don't know. I'm still not used to reading out loud. I don't really do that. So, yeah. This chapter is called The Man Who Taught Me to Swim. The guitar lessons continued. Tommy was getting better, although he often struggled to remember which strings did what. Another thing Wilbur noticed was how his hands seemed to shake a lot, which sometimes made it difficult for him to keep his fingers steady on the fingerboard. Tommy was surprisingly patient when it came to the guitar, just cursing under his breath before he readjusted his fingers to try and get it right. About a week had passed since they'd gone and got pizza when Tommy showed up at Wilbur's door, looking more than a little worse for wear. It was their usual time, not any earlier than they'd met previously, but Tommy looked exhausted all the same. As soon as Wilbur opened the doors to his bus, he noticed how Tommy had dark bags under his eyes, and was shivering in his sweatshirt despite it being bright and sunny out today. "You look like shit," Wilbur said without preamble. Tommy scowled. "I know, dickhead. I definitely feel like shit." Despite the harsh words, Tommy's tone didn't have its usual bite to it. Instead, he just sounded tired. Wilbur frowned. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just not feeling great," Tommy explained, glancing at the ground. Well, that much was obvious. One look at Tommy's hands told Wilbur that he probably wasn't going to be able to do much plucking because of how badly they were shaking today, and any real attempt at a lesson would be useless. But Tommy had still walked all this way to come see him. It was obvious he wanted to be here, and truthfully, Wilbur didn't want to just send him away. Then he came up with a different idea. "How about we don't have lessons today, and we can just hang out instead?" Wilbur offered, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Wouldn't have wanted you to have walked all this way for nothing." Tommy huffed, folding his arms over his chest. "What would we do instead?" While they could walk down the shoreline, digging their toes into damp sand and letting the sea breeze ruffle their hair, Tommy looked like even the act of walking might be enough to make him fall over right now. So maybe something less intensive would be best. I mean, if you're comfortable with it, you could come in here and we could watch a movie on my laptop, Hoover suggested, gesturing to the inside of his bus. Tommy's eyes widened. "Wait, really? You'd let me in your bus?" "Yeah, of course. If you're not comfortable, though, I get it. We can just go get food, or..." Wilbur was cut off by Tommy shoving his way inside, seeming like the energy had been zapped back into him all at once. Tommy stood in the middle of the bus, eyes wide as he looked all around. Wilbur watched his eyes trace over the bed that was shoved on one side of the short bus, with the driver's seat and steering wheel on the other end. Wilbur winced a bit when Tommy's eyes skimmed over the dirty clothes he had piled on the floor, but he didn't seem to blink twice at the mess. "This is so fucking cool," Tommy whispered, wandering over to the one kitchen cabinet Wilbur had installed, and started skimming his fingers over the stickers plastered on the wood. There were stickers from everywhere Wilbur had stayed more than a day in. There was a peeling sticker of the Space Needle, one that was a cartoon graphic of a Yellowstone geyser, another one of the world's biggest ball of yarn, that kind of stuff. There were also postcards taped against dusty windows. If a place Wilbur had gone to didn't have stickers, he'd buy a postcard instead to remember it. Tommy traced his fingers over the different city skylines and nature scenes, his bright smile only growing the longer he looked. Despite the mess, Wilbur had to admit he was proud of his bus, especially when he was showing it to Tommy. Stickers and postcards taped everywhere, the Sharpie doodles he'd done on the walls and ceiling when he was bored, the way the light filtered in through his smudged windows and made his bed a perfect spot for sunbathing. All of it said it was his it was his bus, his home. Wilbur had bought it already renovated for travel, but he had been the one to reinstall the kitchen cabinet when the old one fell apart. He had been the one to figure out how to install a new driver's seat when he saw the old one was too torn up by the previous owner to really be usable. This bus was his in every sense of the word, and it was his favorite place on earth. So the coal of pride in his chest when he saw the blatant awe on Tommy's face was something he treasured. He'd gotten mixed reactions to the bus in the past, with some people thinking it was cool, while others seemed to feel sorry for his small living quarters. But Tommy was looking around with the same spark of wonder that Wilbur had when he first bought this thing, like he understood just how precious a place like this could be. Have you really been to all these places? Tommy asked after a few moments, pointing to one of the postcards on the window. Sure have, Wilbur grinned. I was on the road for about 2 years before I decided to settle here for a bit. That's so awesome, Tommy said, staring at him completely awestruck. You've probably been all over the country. You could say that, Wilbur chuckled, settling himself down on the edge of his bed. What's your favorite place you've been? Tommy asked, leaning forward to get a closer look at a postcard from the Grand Canyon. Humming, Wilbur tapped his chin. Well, I think the whole San Diego area in general is just my favorite area, which is part of why I decided to settle here. I really loved driving through Arizona because the desert scenery was great, but I wouldn't want to actually stay there because it's hot as hell. But, if I had to say my favorite place besides San Diego, it'd probably be Santa Monica. That's the one with that famous fucking, Ferris wheel, right? Wilbur nodded. Yeah, it's on the pier. That whole place is just super cool. Lots of interesting shops and places to eat. I've always wanted to explore the country and shit. Seems like it'd be a lot of fun, Tommy said, moving away from the postcards. I mean, you'll be 18 soon, right? Just do what I did and save up to buy a van or something off Craigslist, was said, leaning back on his hands. Just spend as much time as you can traveling while you're still young. Like, it can be a pain in the ass, but I'm still so glad I did it. Something dark flashed across Tommy's face at that, but he shook it off quickly. Shook it off so quickly, Wilbur wondered if he had imagined it. Maybe. I definitely think that'd be fucking pog. Tommy's voice was tighter than usual, Wilbur didn't notice. Instead, Tommy moved to plump down on the edge of the bed next to Wilbur, since it was the only place to sit besides the driver's seat of the bus. So what movie are we watching? Grabbing his laptop from under his pillow, Wilbur opened it up and logged in, readjusting so he was leaning it back against the wall pillows he had against the back of the bus. Tommy seemed unsure if he could do the same until Wilbur gestured for him to join him. Then he called over so they were both settled back against the pillows. We could watch, Wilbur scrolled through his movie folders, full of movies he had definitely downloaded 100% legally. Of course, why would anyone think otherwise? Until his eyes landed on a familiar name. Oh, have you seen Howl's Moving Castle? No, I don't think so. That's, anime, right? Wilbur nodded. Yep, but the anime dub is actually really, technically, it's animated, but it's not anime. Anyway. Yeah, yep, but the English dub is actually pretty decent for this one if you prefer that over reading subtitles. Sounds good to me, Tommy shrugged, sinking further back into the pillows. If you say it's good, I trust you, big man. Wilbur couldn't help but smile at how much faith Tommy seemed to have in his taste. He pulled up the movie, settling his laptop on full speed before placing it in between the two of them so they could both see it. Then he pressed play and the two started watching. Tommy got more invested in the movie than Wilbur thought he would. He excitedly talked about how much he liked Sophie, how much of a useless man Hal was. When Hal was laying in his bedroom with all his ornaments and jewelry surrounding him, Tommy cracked a joke about how that was like Wilbur with his bus, and Wilbur lightly smacked him in the arm because his bus wasn't that cluttered, thank you very much. Still though, Tommy's exhaustion was obvious even though they were just watching a movie. Not too long after Hal's dramatic hair incident, Tommy dropped his head onto Wilbur's shoulder, and Wilbur didn't say anything as the boy struggled to keep his eyes open. It wasn't long before he was snoring softly, and Wilbur now had a sleeping teenager that was keeping him from getting up. Not that he minded. Tommy clearly needed the rest, and it's not like Wilbur had much else to do that day since he didn't have a shift at Nicky's. So he watched the rest of the movie, then silently turned on another one, making sure to keep the volume low enough so it didn't bother Tommy. By the time Wilbur was part way through Ponyo, Tommy began to stir. He lifted his head, his hair tickling Wilbur's neck, and blinked slowly as if he was trying to remember where he was. What? Is this the same movie? Tommy mumbled, his words slowed by sleep. Wilbur chuckled quietly. No, it's not. You slept through the rest of Howl's. Thought so, Tommy muttered. Knew that ugly orange bitch wasn't there before. By ugly orange bitch, Tommy was referring to Ponyo's father, who was currently talking to his wife on the screen. Why is she so big? Tommy whispered, pressing himself further into Wilbur's side. She's a goddess, that's why, Wilbur explained, resisting the urge to coo at how cute Tommy was when he was sleepy. That's poggers, the boy mumbled again, turning his face away from the screen and burying it into Wilbur's sweater. I'm gonna have a giant goddess for a wife one day. She's the only one who'll be able to handle my big man power. Wilbur snorted. I'm sure you will, Tom's. Notice how Tommy's eyes seem to be fluttering shut again. Raise an eyebrow. You gonna sleep more? Yeah, I think so. Alright, rest up, Cooper said, turning back to the computer and wrapping an arm around Tommy's shoulder so he was a bit more comfortable as he slipped back into sleep. His cold must have been really taking a lot out of Tommy for him to be so exhausted. But he couldn't help but feel warm knowing how Tommy trusted him enough to fall asleep next to him, even though he shouldn't be surprised given they'd been friends for weeks now. Ponyo ended, and Wilbur decided to take a break from his totally legally acquired movie folder and instead pulled up YouTube. He started watching a video essay on sand, and Tommy came to a second time as they were explaining the process of how sand was formed. This is definitely not the same movie, Tommy said, sounding much more awake this time. No, it's not. The other one ended a while ago. Wait, how long have you been asleep for? Tommy asked, shifting away from Wilbur's side to frown at him. About, 4 hours, I'd say? Wilbur shrugged. Tommy's eyes widened. Shit, seriously? Wilbur nodded close again. Jesus, I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to just come over here and pass the fuck out. It's fine. I didn't mind. Plus, it seemed like you needed the rest. At this, Tommy's frown lessened slightly, but he still seemed upset as he straightened up completely, pulling his legs to his chest and resting his chin on his knees. Are you feeling any better, though? Wilbur asked, raising an eyebrow. Tommy nodded. I am, so, thanks for that. Then he narrowed his eyes as they fell on the laptop screen in front of him, the video on sand still playing. Wait, are you watching a fucking documentary on sand? Yup, Wilbur nodded. The speed of silence as Tommy stared at him. Why? Because I like sand. What do you mean you like sand? I like it. It's crunchy. Tommy stared at him as if he'd grown 3 heads. Please don't tell me you go outside and eat the sand here at the beach. Wilbur opened his mouth to respond, but hesitated. Tommy immediately groaned. Oh my god, you eat fucking sand! It was one time! I knew there was something wrong with you, Jesus fucking Christ. Somehow, over the course of the next few weeks, Tommy became one of Wilbur's favorite people. Wilbur looked forward to hanging out with Tommy whenever he got the chance. He would smile whenever Tommy bossed his way into the bakery, making sure to set aside some of his favorite pastries if he knew the boy was going to be coming in that day. Or he would get a knock on the door to his bus in the late morning and grin as he swung the doors open so Tommy could climb inside. They still had their guitar lessons, but it was less often than before. It was mostly because they both just had other things they wanted to do, like when Wilbur found out Tommy had never had Korean barbecue, so he drove them to Convoy, a street that had some of the best Asian restaurants in all of San Diego County, and Tommy ended up nearly making himself sick from all the meat he ate. At that time, Tommy wanted to explore the tide pools with Wilbur, and Wilbur almost stepped on a sea urchin, which made Tommy laugh so hard he slipped and got his pants soaked. Sometimes, though, Tommy would show up not feeling well at all, just like that first time they watched movies together. It worried Wilbur how often he seemed to be feeling under the weather, but whenever he asked Tommy about it, he insisted he was fine and that he just didn't get enough sleep. Either way, though, Wilbur found that he was less lonely now than he had been since he first left home to live in his bus. On a morning like any other, Wilbur woke up to a familiar knocking on the doors of his bus. Outside the window next to his head, he could see thick swaths of fog swirling over the ocean, and shivered as he pulled his blanket tighter around himself. 1 second, Tommy, I'm coming, Wilbur called, burritoing himself up in his blankets before trudging towards the door. In his half-asleep stupor, Wilbur didn't bother actually looking to see who was outside the door. Suffice to say, he had to do a double take when he found himself face to face with his father instead of Tommy. Phil? Wilbur squeaked out. Hey, mate, long time no see. Phil grinned, although there was a tension in his eyes. What are you doing here? Wilbur stammered. You hadn't called in a while, so I got a bit worried, Phil explained, shrugging like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I asked Nikki where you were, and since I haven't seen you since you left, I thought this might be a nice surprise for you. No, this was certainly not a good surprise. Although Wilbur wasn't necessarily upset at his father coming to visit him, he wished he had gotten at least a bit of warning ahead of time. Yeah, of course, Wilbur forced out between his teeth. Just wasn't expecting you to come all the way out here. I mean, it's been nearly 2 years since I've seen you in person. I thought it'd be easier than you driving all the way back home, Phil explained, taking a sip of the coffee in his hand, which Wilbur recognized as being from Nikki's bakery, meaning Phil must have stopped by to talk to her before coming to see him. Damn it, Nikki. He understood why she didn't warn him, because he probably would have made up some excuse about needing to go somewhere and would have driven to fucking Riverside or something to hide out until Phil left. But it was still something he was going to complain to her about later. So, can I hug my kid now, or are you going to keep staring at me like I'm an angry swarm of bees? Phil asked, smoking at him. Wilbur blinked, realizing he was still wrapped in his burrito blanket. Oh, shit, of course. Awkwardly, without dropping the blanket because it was still cold as hell, he hugged his father, half wrapping Phil in the blanket on accident because of his refusal to let go. He had to bend down to wrap his arms around Phil, and while he was still reeling with the shock of his father just showing up at his door, he found himself melting into the familiarity anyway. It had been a while since he'd gotten a hug from his father, and he had to admit, the way his clothes smelled of home and how Wilbur's face still perfectly fit into the crook of his neck, it was nice. After a few moments, they pulled back, and Wilbur stepped out of the bed doorframe and gestured for Phil to go inside. You can come in, but it's pretty messy, so be warned. Phil snorted and stepped up into the bus. I saw your room when you were 15. I doubt you could faze me anymore. Wilbur let the door shut behind him and Phil as they both shuffled around the narrow space in the bus. Phil eyed the minimal counter space he had, along with the trash can that definitely needed to be taken out. He frowned when he saw the clothes piled up on the floor and shoved up against the driver's seat, but didn't comment on it. Instead of just standing while Phil judged his living space, Wilbur plopped back down on the bed, shifting around till he was comfortable, while still holding on to the warmth in his blankets. The inside of the bus was already warmer thanks to Phil's added presence, dropping in extra body heat. It was still chilly enough for Wilbur to stay in his makeshift nest. So, what do you think? Burrow asked. Phil, who was eyeing some of the postcards Wilbur had on the windows, nodded in approval. It's pretty cool. Reminds me of the van I used to have when I was your age. I had some stickers plastered around the inside, but most of the wall decorations were just different dicks I drew with Sharpie when I was bored. Wilbur snorted. Like father, like son, I suppose. Seems like it, Phil laughed, moving away from the windows and heading towards the bed. The floorboards creaked under his feet as he dropped himself onto the edge of the bed, clearly struggling to maneuver around the small space. This place is a bit cramped, though, wouldn't you say? You get used to it, Wilbur shrugged. So where's Techno? He was too busy with work to come with me, but he misses you for sure. Plus, he wasn't really thrilled about the whole surprise aspect of the visit, Phil explained. Yeah, that made sense. Techno would have never gone for the just show up at Wilbur's door without warning route, unless there was something seriously wrong. Phil leaned back on his hands, eyes drifting to the Sharpie doodles on the ceiling of the bus. He opened his mouth to say something else, but was cut off by another series of sharp knocks at the door. Oh, fuck. Just because Phil had been at the door instead of Tommy didn't mean Tommy wouldn't show up today. Will! Bitch boy Wilbur, are you still sleeping? Tommy's muffled voice echoed from outside. Phil furrowed his brows. Who's that? Wilbur shook his head. He's just a friend. Before Wilbur could finish his sentence, the door to the bus was opening. Wilbur cursed when he realized he forgot to unlock it. Forgot to lock it, I mean. Wilbur, you better not have been sleeping with your door unlocked, because your dumbass could have gotten stabbed. Tommy cut himself off while he was shutting the door behind him, his eyes widening when he spotted Phil just sitting on the edge of Wilbur's bed. To his credit, Phil just waved. Hey, mate. Tommy blinked a few times, glancing between Phil and Wilbur. Wilbur, do you realize it's a random guy in your bus? Yeah, Tommy, I think I noticed. Wilbur deadpanned in reply. It's not a random guy, though. This is my dad, Phil. Tommy's eyes were the sides of saucers as he blinked owlishly at the two of them. Oh. Nice to meet you, Phil said, taking a sip of his coffee. Are you a friend of Will's? Yep, Tommy's a friend of mine, Wilbur said before Tommy could make some dumbass remark about Wilbur being a bitch boy. I've been giving him guitar lessons. Oh, I didn't know you gave lessons, Phil commented. He didn't until he met me, Tommy declared proudly. I used my great powers of persuasion to make him agree to teach me. You mean you buttered me up with compliments, Wilbur shot back with a grin. Like I said, power of persuasion, Tommy smoked, owning another chuckle from Wilbur. Phil glanced between the two with something unreadable in his eyes, but if Wilbur had to describe it, he'd almost say he was fond. Well, is that why you're here, Tommy? Is this when you and Will usually have your lessons? Phil asked. Tommy shot an uncertain look at Wilbur, because technically, yes, they did have lessons at this time. But they also hadn't had lessons in nearly a week, because they'd always gone off to do some other stuff. Wilbur decided to save Tommy from his dilemma and answered him. Yeah, it's usually around this time. Phil's eyes widened and he nodded. Oh, shit, I'm sorry about that. I wouldn't want to be messing up your schedule, so if you two want, you can have your lesson right now. I can go to Nikki's Bakery or something and just come back. Oh, I wouldn't want to be interrupting your family time, Tommy muttered, looking embarrassed. No, it's fine. Will and I will have plenty of time to catch up, Phil reassured, smiling at them both. Well, Wilbur didn't want to cut in and explain that it wasn't really a business at this point so much as an excuse for the two of them to hang out. Instead, Wilbur just nodded. If you want, you can hang out on the bus. Tommy and I usually have our lessons outside, Wilbur explained, already pushing to his feet. He was still in his pajamas, but he didn't really feel like asking Phil if he could go outside so he could change. Instead, he just threw his coat over his shoulders. Then he grabbed his guitar case and flung it over his back before walking towards the door to the bus. That sound good, Phil? Yep, fine with me, mate, Phil nodded. Okay, see you in a bit. Wilbur said, waving as Tommy hopped out of the bus with Wilbur following close behind. Shutting the doors to the bus behind him, Tommy was quiet as Wilbur led him away from the bus and towards the shoreline. He was still in view of the bus as Wilbur settled down onto the sand, far enough away that Wilbur wouldn't have to worry about Phil overhearing anything. Once Tommy had plopped down next to Wilbur, the two were silent for a moment, with Wilbur making no move to take out his guitar. So, your dad is here, Tommy said after a few beats. Yep, Wilbur replied, popping the P as he spoke. Did you know he was coming? Tommy asked, furrowing his brows. No, he just showed up at my door like half an hour ago. Apparently he was worried because I stopped calling him, so he asked Nikki where I was and she told him where to find me, Wilbur explained, tapping his fingers along the edge of his guitar case. Nodding, Tommy rested his chin on his knees. Are you okay? I know you said things are a bit weird between you and your family. Wilbur shrugged. I'm not mad or anything. Probably should have been calling Phil more because I knew he'd get all worried and shit. But it's just awkward having him here. Tommy snorted. Yeah, I can fucking see that, man. Sorry about that. I don't know how long he's staying, but it'd probably be better for you to stay away until he's gone. Just because it's gonna be even more awkward the longer he's here, Will told him, pushing his hair back from his face. I mean, I'm kind of the expert at being so annoying it's impossible for things to be awkward, Tommy joked. So if you need a distraction, or maybe someone to set your bus on fire so Phil has to leave, I'm your guy. You're not gonna set my bus on fire, Wilbur gasped. Tommy flashed him a shit-eating grin. Only meant a little fire. Not enough to burn the whole thing down. I know you love that bus like it's your own goddamn child. You're not setting any kind of fire in my bus, Wilbur repeated, frowning at Tommy. He was only able to hold the frown for a few seconds before he chuckled again, shaking his head as he looked at the sand. Though I appreciate the offer, it should be fine. Though, Phil probably won't stay for too long. Well, if you change your mind, you know where to find me. Puffing, Wilbur smiled as he unlatched the guitar case. Keep your arson capabilities in mind in case I need them, he teased, pulling the guitar into his lap to check the strings. Now let's get this lesson started. I'm sure you've already gotten rusty in the week we haven't practiced. Oh, fuck you, bitch. I don't get rusty, Tommy argued. We'll see about that, Wilbur teased, something warm filling his chest as the two fell into their familiar banter. The lesson went about as well as he expected. Wilbur and Tommy quickly forgot about Phil, instead going back to the usual jokes, as Tommy struggled to remember what Wilbur had last taught him. His hands were shaking again, but not to the point where he couldn't properly play, so Wilbur just tried to be extra patient with the boy as he repeated a chord after messing it up. It was chilly with the morning fog swirling around them, thudding its fingers under Wilbur's thin pajamas, even with his heavy coat resting on his shoulders. Sleek gray waves crashed against the shoreline, and the fog was so thick Wilbur could just barely make out the sea lavender dotted across the tops of the sandstone cliffs. When Tommy was shivering too much to properly strum, that was when Wilbur decided the lesson had gone on for long enough. While he offered Tommy his coat, he had refused, insisting his sweatshirt was warm enough and he would just overheat in Wilbur's jacket. Thanks, big man, but I'm gonna head back to Puffy's right now anyway, Tommy told him as he pushed to his feet, Wilbur slinging the guitar case back over his shoulder. Don't feel like exploring the beach when it's this cold out? Wilbur asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, it's that, and I also have a doctor's appointment she has to take me to, Tommy shrugged. Is everything okay? Wilbur asked, frowning at him. Tommy immediately shook his head. Oh yeah, everything's fine. It's just normal, boring checkup shit, you know? Yeah, I get it. Need a ride back to your place? I'm good, don't worry. I gotta deal with your dad anyway, Tommy said, shaking his head. There was a pause then, like Tommy wanted to say something else, but wasn't sure how to. Wilbur watched him, frowning as he waited for Tommy to speak. Suddenly, Tommy was rushing forward and wrapping his arms around Wilbur in a quick hug. Wilbur was surprised at the sudden contact, but hugged it back without thinking. I know family shit can be weird, so if you need me, just let me know, Tommy whispered in his ear. Thanks, Tommy, Wilbur whispered back, smiling as Tommy let go. And Tommy shoved his hands in his pockets so he walked in the opposite direction of the bus, pulling his hood over his head to keep the wind out. Text me when your dad leaves, he called out. Will do, Wilbur said, waving Tommy off as he disappeared into the fog. Once he was gone, Wilbur let out a long breath, wrapping his coat tighter around himself. He glanced back towards the bus, seeing flashes of movement coming from inside, and figured Phil was probably either trying to figure out how to make tea or he was trying to clean up. Part of Wilbur wished Tommy had stayed, but he knew it wasn't fair to make Tommy play third wheel to the awkwardness that was his and Phil's relationship. Despite how much easier it would be on Wilbur to have Tommy there to bounce off of, Tommy had no reason to get so involved in Wilbur's personal problems. Wilbur was an adult. He could hang out with his father by himself. When Wilbur climbed back on the bus, he found Phil shoving all his dirty clothes into a plastic bag. You need a hamper, Will, Phil told him as he hung the bag from one of the cabinet handles. You can't just leave your clothes on the ground. rolled his eyes. Phil, come on, you don't need to do that. It's not that bad. Phil snorted. I'm not going through your stuff, kiddo. Just trying to pick up a bit for you. Nothing. Wilbur set his guitar case down on the down next to the driver's seat, before collapsing back on his bed. He wasn't worried about Phil going through his stuff, but he knew his dad had always respected his privacy growing up and didn't expect that to change now. But this was his bus, and so much of this morning had already been a surprise. He really didn't like his dad moving everything around and disrupting his routine without giving him a chance to prepare. I'll get a laundry hamper. Just leave the clothes alone for now, Will grumbled, throwing an arm over his eyes. Sighing, Wilbur heard Phil stop rustling the plastic and let the bed dip as his father sat down next to him. There was a moment of silence as Wilbur ran his fingers through his hair, gaze skimming the sharpie doodles drawn on the metal ceiling. It seemed like you had fun giving Tommy his lessons. His lesson, Phil commented after a few beats. Have you known him for long? Oh, I thought, I'm dying. I met him about a month and a half ago, Wilbur answered. The kid just saw me practicing one of my songs one day, and decided he wanted me to be his teacher. Wouldn't take no for an answer, even when I told him I was gonna be shit. Phil snorted. Sounds stubborn. God, he is. He's so fucking stubborn. He couldn't hide the fondness that coiled around his voice as he said that, and before he knew it, more words were pouring out. He's so funny, Dad, and he gets me. My humor, my banter. He just gets me like he's known me for years. And I get him too. I don't know what it is, but... He paused, dragging his hands down his face. Is it pathetic to see my best friend as a teenager? There was a warm hand on his knee, and Wilbur moved his arm to see Phil giving him a soft smile. It's not pathetic, Phil reassured him. And honestly, even though I was just watching your lesson from the bus, I haven't seen you smile like that in a long time, Will. Makes me really happy to know you have people who care about you out here. Squeezing his knee before letting go, Phil readjusted and laid back on the bed so he was laying against the pillows next to Wilbur's head. I guess you didn't have much reason to smile like that back when you lived at home, though, Phil said after a moment, his smile having faded now. Wilbur frowned, rolling on his side so he could stare at his father. What are you saying? Phil sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. You don't have to pretend to spare my feelings, Will. I'm not stupid. You left the second you were able to buy this bus, and you haven't come home in years. He paused, taking a breath. Our home wasn't much of a home when you were growing up, now was it? This couldn't be real, right? Wilbur didn't think he'd ever hear Phil actually acknowledge the reasons why Wilbur left. He honest to God thought the man was clueless about Wilbur's true motives for leaving, too wrapped up in his work and grief to even be able to see that his sons had grown up feeling completely alone, albeit in different ways. But here he was, outright saying the things Wilbur had never wanted to voice. It was strange, to say the least. You did the best you could, Wilbur told him, chest twisting painfully at the hurt in Phil's eyes. Man, my voice. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. No, I really didn't, Phil insisted, folding his hands in his lap. I thought I was doing fine after Kristen died, managing my pain the way I always had, with compartmentalizing it down and throwing myself into distraction. Retrospect's a bitch, and it's pretty fucking obvious that instead of handling it the way I should have, I'd have shut myself off from you and Techno. He did. Phil shut himself off, and even though he was still there physically, it had always been obvious to Wilbur that a vital part of him had died along with Kristen. Why bring this all up now? Wilbur asked after a minute, picking at a thread on his sheet. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad you're recognizing stuff, but it just feels so out of place. I'm 25 years old and I haven't been home in years. What changed? I guess you leaving was just kind of a wake-up call for me, Phil explained, a bitter laugh working its way out of his chest. I know that's pretty fucking late to realize shit had been staring me plain in the face, but it's the truth. When you first left and barely called, I figured you were just off having so much fun that you were too busy to remember me and Tech. But after the first year passed and you didn't come home for the holidays, that was when I started to wonder if you buying this thing wasn't just for you to go explore, but for you to run away. Pulsing his lips, Wilbur's gaze flickered back to the ceiling. And Techno? What did he say? Phil snorted. Well, in total transparency, he was actually the one who pointed out to me. So I forced Christmas without you, and I was complaining about how you hadn't called, and he just told me point blank it was because you didn't want to be there. Wilbur winced, imagining how painful of a thing that must have been for Phil. That was one of the main differences between him and Techno. While Wilbur could weave words and form complex sentences to layer the truth in such a way that it was a knife wrapped in lace, Techno never bothered with any of that flowery shit. He got straight to the point, saying exactly what needed to be said, albeit with a few awkward jokes cracked here and there in a poor attempt to soften the blow, keeping the meaning clear all the same. It's not that I didn't want to be there. No, you didn't. Phil cut him off. Even if I was a bit emotionally absent while you were growing up, I'm still your father, which means I know you better than anyone else. If you had wanted to be with us, you would have. Shit. Phil was right, and he knew it. Guilt clawed at Wibble's chest. It had been so much easier to avoid thinking about his family when they were thousands of miles away from him. But sitting here with Phil again brought back all the worry and regret he'd been shoving down over his years on the road, and he hated it. I'm sorry, Wilbur whispered. I just... You don't need to apologize, Phil said softly, resting a hand on his shoulder. I'm not here to guilt-trip you. You had every right to want to leave. I don't blame you at all for it. I just want you to know that I fucked up. Wilbur swallowed the lump in his throat. Okay. I'm also not asking you to come home. I want you to take your time out here. Do everything you want to do. Then if you feel like you want to, I hope one day you can come home and we can try to work on fixing this proper shit fest I've made of our relationship. Because you're my son, and I love you more than anything, Will. You'll always have a home with me, even if I go years without hearing a single word from you. Although Wilbur could feel his throat closing up, he found himself cracking a joke without thinking about it. Even if I call you in 5 years saying Tommy and I are in a Dutch jail and you need to come bail us out? Phil chuckled. Yes, even if I find out you dragged the kid you give guitar lessons to into a Dutch jail, I'd still work my ass off to get you both home. Wilbur laughed, and the knot in his chest loosened just a tad. Phil wasn't asking him to come back just yet, but he was telling Wilbur he had the option, that if he wanted, he could go back and they could make their household into a home. Maybe one day, Wilbur would want that. Would want to try and take a second shot at being a family with Phil and Techno. But today wasn't that day. He wasn't ready to take that leap yet. Honestly, he was still struggling to process the fact that his dad even had this much self-awareness. It would take time for him to get used to the idea of one day actually going home. Thankfully, Phil seemed to understand that. You don't have to say anything to the offer. I just want you to know it's there, he said softly before leaning forward to press a quick kiss to Wilbur's forehead, just like he used to when Wilbur was a little kid. Warmth bloomed in his chest at the small token of affection. Pardon. He couldn't remember the last time Phil did that. Anyway, I just wanted to say that, so the sappy shit is done for now. Phil continued, clapping his hands together as he moved off the bed. Now I need you to get your ass up and drive this bus to the nearest target. All once forgotten, Wilbur frowned. Wait, why? Because I'm only here for today and tomorrow, and I need to make sure this bus is suitable for human habitation while I can. Phil told him, flashing him a grin. First things first, I'm buying you a laundry hamper. I'm also gonna buy you some storage containers to shove under your bed, because God knows it seems like you need a place to put shit. Wilbur eyed the random wires and extra guitar picks sticking out of his cabinets and rolled his eyes. Maybe Phil was right, but he didn't have to call him out on it. Don't even argue, Will. Get behind the wheel, Phil ordered, pointing to the driver's seat. Groaning, Wilbur dragged himself off the bed and sat down in the seat, the engine of the bus roaring to life as he carefully began to back the car out of his parking space. Also, I'm buying you groceries at the store because there's literally nothing in your fridge, and I have no idea how the hell you live like this, Phil added as Wilbur washed his rearview mirror to make sure he didn't hit anything. My fridge is fine, thank you very much. Mate, all you have in there is a leftover pastry, a single beer, and a bag of those little Baby Bell wax cheeses. Baby Bell cheese is good for you, Wilbur pointed out as he pulled onto the main road. Phil sighed and moved back towards the bed to sit down where Wilbur drove. Can't believe my kid is in his 20s and he's still gonna force him to eat fucking vegetables, he muttered under his breath. I heard that, Wilbur shouted out. Good. Dying. Guys, I can't do this. My throat can't take this strain. In the end, Phil's visit wasn't really as bad as Wilbur thought it would be. Sure, there were still some awkward moments between them, but they spent most of the first day putting Wilbur's bus in order. By the end of it, Wilbur had to admit, his bus did seem a lot cleaner, although he knew it was probably going to be a wreck again within a week. The following day, Wilbur decided to take Phil to all his favorite spots in San Diego. They visited La Jolla Cave, a beautiful small beach surrounded by cliffs on all sides to create the illusion of privacy. Then not cave, cove. Sorry, I read that completely wrong. And they walked around Balboa Park, one of the largest parks in the city, and got dinner in the Gaslamp Quarter. They talked, caught up a bit on the things Wilbur had missed out on since leaving, and at the end of the day, Wilbur even played Phil a few of his new songs. He drove Phil to the airport, and his heart clenched when Phil hugged him goodbye. It was strange, realizing just how much he'd miss his father when he'd been so certain this trip would be something he'd have to grit his teeth to get through. But even still, Wilbur was eager to get back to his routine, and Wade fell off with a smile before pulling his bus back into the airport loop. Maybe he decided to call Phil when he landed, just to make sure he got home alright. Maybe they ended up talking for a full hour long after Wilbur had made sure he was safe. But that was a secret kept between Wilbur and his dad. A little side and chapter end note. Phil looking around Wilbur's bus. Damn bitch, you live like this? Nice. Okay. That's the end of the second chapter. And took us 35 minutes. My throat is dead. I'm dying. That is not long. It's a very short podcast. Since we're going chapter by chapter, I have paint all over my hand. That's fine. We're going chapter by chapter, so obviously some of them are going to be longer than others. Also, I think I was speed running a little bit today because, I don't know, it's hot in this whole getup, and also it's just my throat hurts. My throat is sore. I feel like I need to go on, like, to prepare for podcast episodes, I need to, like, not speak for a full day. Just to save my voice. Because, man, it is rough. It really shreds my voice. Which is absolutely insane. Anyway, this has been the second episode. Very cool. Hopefully it won't take me as long to get the third episode out. I don't know, we'll see. I'm about to enter my finals week at college. And then I'm gonna be, like, busy with other stuff, preparing to transfer and lots of things. Lots of things. So we'll see. But, yeah. Cool. See you guys later. We all have a lovely day. And bye-bye.